Welcome to Courage Class. I'm Dr. Lindsay Kwok Hugh, and each week I'm in conversation with our community's changemakers and trailblazers. Together, we explore the unspoken parts of our Asian and Western experiences, finding strength, growth, and healing that reflect who we truly are, not who we've been told to be. I'm so glad you're here. Class is now in session. Hey Courage Class, it's Lindsay here, and I am so excited about today's episode. Today we're speaking with Samuel Shin. He's a licensed therapist, a coach, and a men's group facilitator, and someone who I honestly think we should really be calling the Guy Whisperer, because he is here to shed light on why it's so difficult for the men in our community to be emotionally vulnerable and to connect. And he has helped countless Asian men in his own practice break free of cultural stigma, heal, and really step into their empowered, authentic selves. Now, I really think that the men in our community have been dealt a totally unfair hand. On the one hand, in Western society, they're historically emasculated. They're not seen as leaders. They're not seen as powerful individuals. And in a general Asian context, well, they're really taught that emotions are only for the weak. And to not be seen by others, this leaves them so lonely and I imagine emotionally isolated. Well, Courage Class, today, Samuel is going to really break it down for all of us. What are the men going through in this specific moment? He's going to share the steps that he takes in his own clinical practice to really get men to open up, and what we can do as partners, as aunties, as granddaughters, as daughters, what we can do to best support them. Now, this, I think, is an incredible episode for anyone who has ever longed to be closer, maybe more collaborative, or more communicative with the important men in their lives. So, let's take a listen. Samuel, I have to tell you that this was the one topic I really wanted to be talked about in this first season. And you are one of the few licensed therapists out there, I feel like, really talking about this and doing this important work. So I'm just so thrilled to have your expertise and your real world experience. I'm always so fascinated the journey that led people to this work. What were those early experiences that really shaped your interest in men's mental health and healthy masculinity in general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because it wasn't something I set off to do outright, right? It was just mental health, my own healing, my own desire to be free. Psychology was always my passion. So it was interesting. I'm unique in that way as well. From high school, it was the thing that grabbed me and I took it and ran with it and just kind of loved it and was really good at it. But yeah, I was, struggling myself as a young man or boy. And I'm sure that's what carved this path for me. Because two things I think come to my mind when it comes to masculinity. One is, I was pretty lost. I think Asian parents are good at taking care of physical needs, but they don't know how to provide guidance emotionally, psychologically, even in terms of life. And so I think I was struggling a lot emotionally and didn't have any support. And I found myself in, my brother I have an older brother, he started to rebel. And at the time I was like just super Christian, good boy. But I think I was feeling a lot of constriction. My friends started to become more rebellious, and it just led me down a path where eventually I found myself doing lots of drugs, getting into like gang activities, acting out. I wasn't doing the violent stuff as much, but a lot of like just illegal activities, and my friends were the ones like fighting. Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, I ended up going to jail a couple times as a teenager. And so, I was just a lost boy looking for, I think, role models. And The other piece is my dad wasn't a very like healthy masculine. He wasn't even like a masculine figure for me to look up to. He was pretty sensitive and emotional.
Hmm.
So I kind of took care of him a lot. Like
I
it
see.
felt like that. I was almost more mature than him. And so I think I was searching for something, and I was searching for role models. And I found these older boys who were masculine at the very least, even if it wasn't healthy. They
Mm.
were struggling too and lost in their own ways. But I think that's what shaped me very early on. Um, Both not having a masculine figure to look up to, and then also just being lost myself and trying to find meaning or something to help me like be more of a man. And
Hmm.
I guess gang activities is sort of a rite of passage or something into masculinity. But yeah, I don't think I had that rite of passage or role models. And so you know looking back, I'm sure that's why I got into the work that I'm doing helping men, is because if I had somebody like me growing up, an
Yeah.
Asian man, not just a therapist, but like a mentor who's, done a lot of work on himself and, opened up, spiritually, psychologically, and trying to live a healthy human life, like I'm sure that would have helped me and a lot of my friends, right? So for me
Yeah.
to do that now, I think is kind of helping my younger self,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And, as you're sharing your story, I just hear this incredible level of like self-awareness. Like
Mm,
you had this love for psychology. You knew that you were searching for meaning. You knew and had this awareness that you were sort of the person taking care of your dad. You were in this pursuit of some, I don't want to say role model, but a version of masculinity. I'm just really impressed with the level
I
of
see.
awareness that you carried, the maturity that you had as a young man to pursue,
Mm,
your work into therapy. And
mm,
as I mentioned earlier, you have this 10-year career, 10 plus year career as a therapist,
mhm,
for several years before stepping out to create sort of your own unique approach to
mm,
healing that it seems like it incorporates a lot of different modalities. You just mentioned spirituality, there's a life coaching component to it. It's not just pure therapy. Can you
mhm,
talk about what sort of prompted that transition, and
mhm.
how has that really shaped the way you support your clients? And
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And I appreciate that you are able to like hone in on that, or that's where your curiosity goes, because it's a big part of my journey. My journey was one of not just therapy, but like, how do I be the best version of myself? How do I
mm,
be human, like fully?
yeah.
And so that was like my question growing up to, even as a teen, was how do I be myself? Because I just felt
Mm,
like I couldn't be myself in my family. Um, and so I kind of, that's what thrust me onto this self journey and psychology and eventually therapy. When I went to grad school, I ended up at a school that was very alternative and holistic. And it holistic in the sense that it was focused on mind, body, heart, spirit, and how do those things play into who we are, and how do we heal on these levels and transform ourselves to really be the fullest versions of who we are. And so that taught me lots of different things, about who I am and how to be
mm,
myself. I learned some of the big pieces for me were around sexuality and like human sexuality, and being comfortable with sex as a human being,
yeah.
and learning really radical ways of opening up to that in myself,
Mm,
and like liberating that type of energy. So that was a huge part of my journey. I grew up very Christian. Dad was even a pastor, and like repressed kind of fundamentalist type of sexual
I see.
shame. And
Yeah.
so that work was really transformative for me.
Yeah.
The other huge part of my journey was meditation. So I, for probably 10 years, was like hardcore into meditation, like trying not just
Oh, cool.
mindfulness,
Yeah.
but like trying to get enlightened,
Yeah.
like trying to So like traveling to India and like going to ashrams. Yeah. Worked with a couple different spiritual teachers during that time. And yeah, I had a lot of experiences through that were super transformative and helped me to open up to myself and life and people and in a different way and reality. I also did like shamanism and got into Korean shamanism, things like this. And so therapy just felt quite limited.
Mm,
And therapy was an integral part as well. Like I
okay.
would include therapy amongst those pieces, and it was instrumental and actually absolutely necessary in my healing. It's one part for me. I was wanting to get into coaching because coaching kind of lends itself to being more dynamic in the role and getting to teach or work with clients in a different way, like in a way that I want, not just that's regulated in
Mhm.
this therapeutic kind of
Right.
legal, ethical way,
Sure.
medical model sometimes. So it just felt more freeing. The final piece is just I discovered men's work too in 2018. And it helped me focus on masculinity in a way that these other things didn't. And
Mm.
so I love that. Got certified in becoming a facilitator in men's work, and that's also what shifted my focus to working with men.
Okay.
You know, it was really kind of all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were really open to so many diverse and incredible experiences that really opened you up to, like you said, like meditation and spirituality, and
Mm-hmm.
men's work. And something you said at the very beginning, a core question that you had was, how do I be human and how do I be myself and my family? And I definitely, as a woman, can so connect with that. I mean, that's really what led me into my own therapy journey. But there are
Mm-hmm.
definitely unique pressures that
Mm-hmm.
Asian men face. And I'm wondering if we could jump into that component. Could you share in your own work, what are some of the most common emotional or identity struggles that you see in the men that you work with?
Mm-hmm. I made a TikTok, Instagram reel about this recently, so it's pretty
Mm,
top of mind. But I think
yeah.
there's like four categories, I would say. The first, not in any particular order, one is race and assimilation. And what I mean by that is the pressures that someone can face when they're not around people who look like them or who act like them.
Yeah.
And so in the States, it can be pretty common that Asian men can, especially growing up in a school, formative years where they want to fit in, like assimilate and feel like there's something wrong or like, you know, even cut off or devalue being Asian. And the effect that this has on mental health cannot be understated. I think it really affects self-esteem,
Yeah.
self-worth, identity,
Yeah.
feeling like you can be yourself, especially during those formative years. It can really have an impact. Another challenge I see is, I would say, family versus self. And
Yeah.
this isn't just Asian men. Asian folks in general have this where they almost kind of contrast each other. It's like
Yeah.
it's either following the norms, values, expectations from the family and being a good son or good daughter, or, you know, like doing what you're told, and or like being yourself, carving your own path, finding like your own happiness and fulfillment in your life. A lot of folks feel like they can't be themselves or take that path because they've adopted and internalized those messages, those expectations and roles from their parents.
Yeah.
And that often does lead to a very unhappy life, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, can I ask you,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
one of the things that I've learned in therapy is that there are, and I think that this is probably true of Western culture as well, but particularly in Asian culture, there's very specific like men
Mm-hmm.
and women roles. And,
Mm-hmm.
my husband was trained to be the provider and the producer and to withhold emotion. And so, does that feel true to Asian men, specifically the way that they're trained generally across Asian culture, that they're told to be a certain person in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because traditionally Asian dads or like immigrant dads are, you know, pretty stoic, just
Yeah.
focus on work,
Yeah.
don't really spend time with the family too much, or definitely not emotionally, right? Like
Yeah.
emotionally absent. And so a lot of Asian men or children, boys who grow up with dads like that, adopt that mentality, that role, that inability to emotionally connect with their family or even themselves, if they have a
Yeah.
family eventually, and they just focus on work. So that's very, very common.
Yeah.
And it comes at the expense of a lot of things,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel like, as we're moving into our 40s, my husband and I, it's like that work and producing and, it was very important getting our degrees. It was all very important. It feels like in our 30s, but in our 40s, it almost feels like connection,
Mm.
connection with oneself and each other. I feel like we're just in the process of building these connection tools and skills. And it is so frustrating to realize in this moment that, wait a minute, I didn't learn this, but also releasing that. Is that something that you found in the work that you do?
No, totally. I
Yeah.
think that was one of the other things I was going to enumerate or name
Yeah.
is yeah, this inability to communicate and express feelings, and in relationships this does a lot of damage,
Yeah.
especially, or can in the family as well
Yeah.
if you have kids. um but yeah, probably maybe the most common issue across Asian folks, I might say, right? Because like, where are you going to learn this if not your parents? Your parents are the ones who are supposed to, I don't want to say, yeah, I think they're supposed to teach you. A lot
Yeah.
of our parents just didn't have that because their parents never taught it. And
Yeah.
then their parents, it goes on
Yeah.
and on. But how do you regulate your emotions? How do you communicate? How do you understand what emotions or
Mm.
feelings are going on? And then how do you communicate these effectively? Those three things go into what we're talking about. How do you live a healthy emotional life and
Yeah.
have fulfilling relationships? Those are essential. But Asian folks have to sort of start at ground zero, where it's like, okay, what am I even feeling?
Mm.
Are emotions even okay to feel? Like,
Yeah.
it's so suppressed,
Oh my
so
God.
it's a process. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the type A. Is there like a window for that process? Like what's the time frame that I have? Or no, it's just
Shortcut.
different. Yeah. Is it different for everybody who goes on this journey?
Yeah, is there a shortcut, or
Yeah.
like
Is it a 3 month
fast track?
process?
Yeah, my 2 months, it's 3 months now, actually, like 12-week program, but
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But that is the goal, I
Yeah.
think. I guess I don't know if there's a quick
Yeah.
way, but I think the process to me is pretty straightforward.
Mm.
Uh, it's not, it doesn't, the path isn't straightforward, but the process is. And usually it's just like creating some safety with
Yeah.
somebody, creating safety and trust. Um, I guess it's a relational process. It has to
Yeah.
always be relational. So I think that's why therapy is really good, is when you can develop a relationship with someone and it feels safe, and you feel accepted,
Yeah.
appreciated, and you are encouraged, even validated around expressing emotions, encouraged to express and validated around
Yeah.
expressing emotions, then you realize it's okay. And then you start to be like, you start to open up. Like, I have
Yeah.
clients, a client comes to mind who would just break down randomly, and he didn't even know why,
Oh,
but like so
yeah.
much guilt, so much shame, just starting to even entertain the possibility of like feeling safe and like emotional expression is okay. He
Yeah.
would just cry. Like, he broke
Oh,
down in one of my groups. Um, Periodically, then he worked with me one on one, and he's been like having these breakdowns, but they're like heart openings.
mm.
And it's because he's starting to feel safe and to get the permission to be himself and to express his feelings, and to know a lot of it is just realizing how much he wasn't allowed to do that, and how much
Oh,
pain and disappointment that caused him, right? And so that's the breakdown. That's the, oh
yeah.
my gosh, like, this is
Yeah.
what I needed and I didn't get, and I'm getting it from this group, or I'm getting it from this person, and like it feels so good but also brings up the pain. So
Yeah.
I would say relationship and building safety and a trust
Mm,
is key. Um, and those, I would say those heart openings, like that is what did it for me as well. Like
mm,
having these what I would call heart opening experiences where, I'm around other people and, I'm being seen, I'm being heard, and I'm opening up to things that feel like shameful or vulnerable, like that I don't show a lot to the world, these sides of myself. Doing that process again and again just
mm.
naturally leads to this healing and opening. Yeah. And how fast you go depends on how much you're willing to feel that vulnerability, face it, and show these
Yeah.
parts of yourself again and again, again and again to people around you in safe ways. Again, not just
Right.
strangers on the
Right.
street, but
Exactly. And to your
you can
point,
accelerate it.
like you have to feel safe in that environment to really
Yeah.
experience that and to have trust in relationships and connection with the folks or whoever you're permitting to see
Hmm.
you. But that story just really gave me chills, and I definitely want to get into the wins that you have achieved with some of your clients. You were naming, you were talking about a TikTok, Instagram reel, and you had
Yeah.
said that race and assimilation was one of the struggles that you see in the men that you work with. The second one was family versus self.
Self. Yeah.
Can you recall number 3 and number 4?
Yeah. Number
So
three.
yeah.
No, no, it's okay. Number three is emotional regulation. Like a lot of men, women too, I could see, but a lot of the Asian men I work with, as you get older, responsibilities build, stress builds.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to manage stress effectively or process emotions, manage your emotions, regulate, something will come along and just knock you off, and you will feel overwhelmed, lost, you'll lash out. Yeah, so emotional regulation and
Mm,
stress management is something that Asian folks, I think, don't learn
yeah.
effectively growing up. And then the fourth one is just the communication in relationships. Yeah, a lot
Mm,
of relationship issues because Asian men don't know how to express their feelings, and so their partners often feel distant. It can breed mistrust and abandonment and a lack of intimacy and closeness and unhappy relationships. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Samuel, that was really great. I really appreciate you breaking those 4 struggles that you see oftentimes in the men that you work with. We talked a little bit about the cultural expectations, maybe some of the intergenerational, the internal dynamics that shape the way men struggles, maybe. Could you talk, are there like larger systemic issues or factors? Well, actually, you mentioned racism or any societal pressures that
Mm-hmm.
intersect with the work that you do or impact the men
Mm-hmm.
who you work with.
So I think that one of the things that comes up. So I'll say this. Sometimes I look at Asian men in different categories, or like there's different types of Asian men. Not all Asian men are obviously the same.
Mm,
And there are some men who are really affected by the stereotypes
mm,
of what it means to be an Asian man, and the emasculation or not being portrayed in media, and yeah, like just not feeling like they are seen as masculine.
mm,
Like a lot of men, I can feel that in myself. I wouldn't say that it's something that's held me back as much as I see it holding a lot of Asian men back.
mm,
Like it's just deep in their minds as this like almost this insecurity that they blame society for. And I don't think it's wrong inherently, because there is some truth to how society has stereotyped Asian men. But it's like they're stuck there,
mm,
stuck with feeling like a lot of their life is caused, a lot of the problems in their life, whether dating, relationships, could be anything, mental health, they blame it on these stereotypes. And that's really tough. I don't see a ton of these clients because they usually are stuck in their own resistance or feelings. They don't reach out for help.
mm.
They don't want to feel vulnerable and
Yeah.
grow in that particular way. I would say that also intersects often with, and this is maybe more common, like to be a man, you have to be a certain way,
Mm,
and your physique has to look a certain way. You have to have a certain
yeah,
amount of money and career success.
yeah.
A certain amount of women that you date or sleep with, and like there's a lot of what it means to be a man that we get from society that
Mm,
also plays into insecurities, mental illness, feeling not enough in general, just as a way to understand what I'm talking about with a
mm,
certain category of Asian men who won't reach out for therapy.
yeah.
They're trying to focus and work on their mental health through these other means. Like they're blaming society, and then they're also trying to just work out,
Mm,
build a successful career, focus on money, but never focusing on the inner
yeah.
journey and the
Mm-hmm.
self inside, whether it's emotionally, mentally, they're trying to feel enough by doing these other things, working out. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's a real issue I see, and um, that a lot of Asian men can have these things imprinted in their minds, and it can
Yeah.
cause a lot of insecurity and mental health issues.
Absolutely. I mean, same with
Yeah.
women, I feel like. I'll speak from my own experience. It's almost unconscious for me.
Oh yeah,
You know,
for
I have a
sure. Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of like, I'm supposed to do this, or, it was supposed to happen like this. And I've had to really work on one, bringing that to the surface, and then two,
Mm.
asking myself, who made that rule up, And so I thank you for talking about that, Samuel. I wonder if we could transition to talking about your therapeutic and coaching methodology.
Hmm.
And I wonder if you would be willing to walk us through your approach to helping men show up more fully as themselves. What does it actually look like if I'm a client and I want to come to you?
It's definitely evolved over the years, but I would say one is this masculinity piece you're mentioning, but
Mm,
another is just what I think healing is and looks like in general.
mm,
And I would say I've developed this approach that is pretty general, but it's kind of my approach. I just call it the pie method. And I don't think this is just my method. I think this is just what happens in healing and transformation and growth, which is you need to identify the root cause of the problem.
mm,
And once you identify the root cause, you need to have techniques, some sort of way to address it. And I call that the P, which is process. So you need to process the pain or the disappointment or the guilt or the shame or whatever it is that's holding you back from your past. It's trauma too sometimes, but you need to identify that. So you really need to get clear on assessment, which I think I'm really good at. That's probably one of the things I'm best at, is really getting to the root cause, because that's what I did in my life. I was like, the whole reason I went into therapy and psychology was like, I need to figure out myself and what's the root cause, because I feel like something is not quite right. I feel like I'm not quite me. I need to figure out why.
mm.
And so really honing in on what the person is struggling with and then where that comes from. And then you process it. So I have tools, techniques to process a lot. Sometimes, oftentimes it's like mindfulness and kind of inner child work, but you need
Okay.
to really go to the root and process it and release it, which is not an easy process. And then in that process, you rewire the brain, the nervous system. Like
Mm,
our brain, our nervous
yeah.
system is wired based on our past experiences. We think genetics or we think our neurochemistry is off. And no, it's like your environment, your upbringing is what shaped your developing nervous system to be the way that it is. And so right now you're carrying those patterns. And so when you process and get to the root cause, process emotions, especially difficult experiences, that creates this internal shift.
Mm,
So you start to feel like new insights, new feelings, letting go of old feelings. It's a really difficult process, but that is normal. That's part of this like
okay.
um, process of transformation.
Okay.
And then through that, actually, so that's I, process is P, I is integration, and then embody is the sort of fulfillment or conclusion of this integration process where you are now living in the world more as yourself, but in
Mm,
a practical way. So
I
this
see.
affects your relationships, this affects your career, how you feel on a daily basis. It's almost like it's become ingrained and like now it's more of a habit, and it just it just will naturally occur. It's all very natural process. This
Yeah.
is a higher level conversation, but it
Oh,
happens
this is so
naturally
good,
through
Samuel. This
healing.
is so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you follow. Yeah. I don't know if Asian men follow as a whole,
No.
but I know there are Asian men who do, but I'm glad you're with me.
No. And I just want to
Okay,
selfishly point
cool.
out that, Courage Class, you heard it here first. This is Samuel Shin's proprietary method, PI,
My
process
method. Yep.
integration and embodiment. Samuel, you
Mhm.
use a combination of tools like meditation, talk therapy. You said human sexuality, masculinity, spiritual practices, so many different modalities are incorporated into your work. How do you make those accessible to clients, to men who may be sort of new to this kind of work?
It's a great question because I think men in general can be behind when it comes to this type of stuff. And
Mm,
and again, they want practical, they want goal
yeah.
oriented, they want, actions, and they
Yes.
want like mindset might be the closest thing. I just need to shift my
Mm,
mindset. There's different ways that it happens or that I've seen it happen for men. I'll talk about what I do, but sometimes a man has to hit rock bottom, unfortunately, before he actually reaches out for help, and that's the
yes.
unfortunate part, right?
Yeah.
Or have a job, and abruptly, or a divorce, a relationship, and some sort of trauma. This isn't just men, like women. I know a
Yes.
lot of women who go through this as well. It could be
Yeah.
burnout, something that forces you to like let go and like look within and try to figure out what's off and why things are off, and
Yeah.
you know question um your life and yourself and how you've been living. And so I think that happens for men quite a bit. But if someone reaches out before that or starts to search, um, before it gets to that rock bottom, it could be through therapy. Sometimes partners will
Mm,
be the catalyst. I used to go to the specific men's retreats with this organization, and so many of the men are like, yeah, my girlfriend paid for this, my girlfriend wants me to go to this, so I'm here, or my wife. And the women are onto us. The women can spot these things before we can sometimes as men,
yeah.
and that's just because they're more emotionally attuned.
Yeah.
But for me and my work, I think I just go back to the safety piece. I think I'm really good at creating a safe space for men. And so whether it's the groups or one-on-one work,
Yeah.
once they realize this guy is like safe, this guy's not going to judge me. Oh, this guy gets it. Oh, he's really nice, like trustworthy guy.
Yeah.
Like they start to open up, and maybe it's just because I've been doing this for so long. They they naturally open up, and when you get a man to open up, like it's just gonna keep going.
Mm,
And so it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper over time, to where they start to talk about, like, that client I mentioned who breaks down. Like it just gets to the core issues and the guilt or the shame or the pains and traumas, and so it takes time. Sometimes it's really quick. um but yeah, it just depends. But that's
yeah.
the first thing, is just creating that safe space, because honestly, Lindsay, men don't have that. Men do not
Yeah.
have safe spaces to open up,
Yeah.
especially with other men, but even with women, about their challenges, the real challenges that they have inside, that they struggle with, that they feel like nobody's going to understand, or they feel like they should be ashamed of, or like they feel like less of a man for. Like they're
Yeah.
just they don't have spaces to open up about
Mm,
that. So I think me being another man, if it's a group or it's just one-on-one, like helps them feel safe
yeah.
and like understood.
Yeah. No, I can totally tell. I mean, we have just sort of met via Zoom, and I can tell that you have a gift for creating that safe space.
Mm,
Because the very first, when I asked you to tell your personal story and you talked about and you shared so openly and so vulnerably, I feel like
mm.
I can see why someone like my husband or other men, other Asian men would be attracted to you. And so you talk about that time component, right, of building that trust, how that relationship is incredibly, it's critical. It seems like it's foundational to any healing process. You have this gift, Samuel. I have a question as a partner. You know how, and you just shared that men don't typically, for whatever reason, to feel comfortable opening up. Is there anything that maybe I can do as a partner to be a better listener or to help create that safety, that space? Not speaking from personal experience or anything, because I'm really struggling to do that.
Right. Oh, that's such a good question.
Yeah,
And
sorry I didn't
so
include that here, but I
yeah,
just
no,
so
that's yeah,
curious, you know.
that's okay. Yeah, let me think for a second because I get the challenge,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes women feel like they're holding a lot of space already for a man
Mm,
because of their unconscious, their past traumas or their unconscious patterns or their disconnection from their emotions often. So it's
yeah.
like it can feel like pulling teeth just to get anything out of them. And so to say, because the first thing instinct that I had was, yeah, recognize how difficult it is. This may not be something you could do, but recognize that your man is probably holding a lot of things that he's not sharing with his friends. He feels like he can't share with his friends, his family, or you. And it's like eating away at him. This is a lot of men. In those initial stages, when a man starts to open up or starts to feel safe, it is a lot or it can be a lot, like they don't know how to navigate it. They don't even know how to express. They feel shame. They feel guilt. They feel like running away. And so you have to be very patient and very open, almost like a therapist or dare I say parent or like a healthy parent or mom or something
Yeah.
like that. And it's not that you're that person for them, all the time, or I'm not saying one should even be a partner, should not be, but it's very tricky, I think, because if a man has not opened up in this way and learned that it's okay to be vulnerable, it can feel like a lot
Yeah.
to hold space for.
Mm,
And so I think it's tricky. I think some women I've heard have more space. They have space for men because they understand, but not a lot of women can really understand or relate to a man's experience and know what it's like,
mm,
just in the same way a man can't a woman's, right?
yeah.
So I guess it would be so my approach to couples would be like to help the man tap into some very vulnerable aspects of their life and start to own it and acknowledge it and just have the partner, wife, girlfriend, whatever, whomever witness and sit and listen and be there. Because I think when the man is able to open up in a vulnerable way, truly, naturally the partner will listen. And I've had this experience with the men I work with. Their wives will be like, "Oh, I didn't realize that's what it
Yeah.
was like for you. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that
Yeah.
was what's going on for you." Like, and then the heart just opens. But that's I think
Yeah.
the place to get to.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find patience when you're triggered, right? But that's
Yeah.
patience is probably the word.
You know, I thank you. Thank you for saying that. First of all, I feel like this is going to help so many of my female friends. It's certainly helping me in this moment. I
Mm,
think, my husband, he's really incredible and he has worked so hard in therapy,
mm,
in couples counseling to build up
mm,
his emotional capacity. I have learned so much about myself and about our dynamic. I'm so grateful. He's an amazing partner to have. And what you just did for me is normalize his
mm.
experience and the
Oh, yeah.
experience that I've had with him. That it is very difficult for a man to open up for a variety of different reasons. It's their training, it's their internal shame. What has really stuck out to me is that one, yes, of course, patience, listening, but also, it's almost feels like if you're in a relationship, it's almost like two people's work to create that space where you can listen to each other, I feel like we've just talked past each other, like for a lot of our sort of married life. It's like doing your own sort of internal work and then coming together to do the work of collaborative listening and empathy and compassion.
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
is probably the most normal
Okay.
dynamic in heterosexual relationships, probably even not heterosexual, but yeah,
Yeah.
where it's like the classic anxious avoidant dynamic where
Mm.
one partner is like, I need to know more, like I need closeness, I need communication, I need to know what you're feeling, and the other
Yes.
is like,
Yeah.
like
That's us.
chill
Yeah.
out, or like I'm feeling suffocated, or I need to withdraw. And like that's classic. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good
yeah.
to know.
Hmm.
Samuel, I'd love to move into, to illustrate a transformation that you have led with one of your clients. And I wonder if could you share a breakthrough moment or a transformation you've witnessed that really just stuck with you?
Mm. Man, there are
So
so
many.
many
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
I will give some or maybe one example, but I think as I was hearing you, it made me just think of the core sort of archetypal, if not the way this journey actually looks, no matter who it is.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about, because I'm thinking about all the clients that that came up in my mind just now. And the common denominator is that they all had to go through their darkness. And I just for some reason trust the darkness in us and people, and just because I've been on this journey for so long and helped others. And a lot of the meditation too was just like diving into and learning to get comfortable in the dark and the unknown, and also the pain,
Mm.
the suffering. And so I have this almost, I don't want to say innate, but this trust that when someone can go into their own darkness fully, and especially when they're supported
Mm.
with someone who doesn't need their darkness to change or invalidates them or tries to make it okay, man, they will come out of it and rise up and just like,
Yeah.
transform. And so I would say maybe that's one of my gifts or like real strengths, is that I'm it's also why clients hate me or have resistance, because I'm like, we got to go here,
Mm.
but but when I'm there with them, they can heal, they can that's what creates that change in them, and then their nervous system, their identity, their changes into their more fuller selves. And yeah, so many examples of that, in my work. And yeah, clients who, you know they go through their own version of darkness, like lifelong anxiety, and then we figure out what the anxiety is about, and we literally process it, and they feel it in their body. And I help them transmute it in,
Yeah.
through meditation. And then their life just starts to completely turn around, where
Wow.
they're able to be themselves around people.
Yeah.
They change careers because they realize it wasn't fulfilling, leave jobs, start to date for the first time.
Wow.
um yeah, really get
Wow.
into clients who all of a sudden develop the courage and to ask out someone they've been in love with forever,
Oh my
and a
gosh.
client got married, like there's
Wow.
so much that can come out of learning to be your authentic self, this word that's used so much. But the authentic self is just you being the fullest version of you. And there
Yeah.
are blocks that we all have. And that's what I mean by the getting to the root cause. Like, everyone has their own version of what is blocking them. And so I
Yeah.
have to really hone in and figure out what this individual's block is, and then help them process and work through it. And then it opens them up to so much in their life.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's the best
Yeah.
part of this work, is when I get to see that. Obviously, there's a lot of other good things and difficult things, but yeah, I don't have a lot of words for it except just being extremely touched when it happens,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
grateful.
One of the things that I noticed on your website, one of your clients' feedback was that you help them, quote, embody their divine masculinity. And
Mm,
I was like, so floored that there's this man saying that. And, maybe that's my own
Mm,
stereotype, but like I was just like, whoa,
mm.
that is amazing. What does that phrase mean to you? And how did you help him or men generally access that version of that themselves?
This is a great question. I love
Yeah.
that we're diving into it. I would have to go back to ask that client what he meant. But I think what he meant,
Mm,
and what I think I actually facilitate a lot with my clients, is helping them get more grounded in their bodies and be
mm,
more present in their lives. So a huge part of my work that I'm not talking about, or I haven't talked about in depth, I've mentioned it, is inner child work. And I think inner child work goes
mm,
back to those time periods when we start to feel emotions or traumas or some sort of disappointments, pains, again, all these things that can be overwhelming for a child. And then we find ways to uh, like suppress and then conform or be someone else, be the version of ourselves that we think we should be, maybe our
mm.
parents' expectations.
Yeah.
So we, in effect, suppress or disconnect from our deeper inner self, or we can call it our inner child. And so this whole idea of being grounded in your body or becoming more embodied and present is when that separation can start to like dissipate. So
Uh,
it's like we're no longer living from this idea of who we're supposed to be, and we're
got it.
not run by these past traumas or conditions or we don't have this like false self or false identity anymore. We're not living in our heads, because that's usually where a lot of us operate.
Mm,
We come into our hearts, we come into our bodies in a way where we're living as who we are more. And it's like this visceral experience, very unconscious, but it's like this feeling of like I'm okay, I'm good,
mm,
like who I am is okay. I don't need to question and doubt myself all the
mm,
time. I can be comfortable in my own skin. And it sort of creates this relaxation and this settling feeling where you trust yourself, and you trust yourself more, and you're more regulated. So that experience is a product of healing work, I think, but also the healing work that I do. And so it naturally leads to this feeling of like comfort in oneself, in one's body, where there's less questioning, less doubts, less anxiety, less like thinking about what other people think about you. And you're just like,
yeah.
I'm just here and I'm just
Yeah.
me. I'm thinking of some clients who feel this way,
Mm,
this like grounded sense of self, but like there's still more for them to do to become their authentic self. I've seen this in retreats as well, like these men's retreats where, I spent like 2 weeks in the desert, 10 days in a desert with like 250 men. And we're like crying and breaking down and screaming, yelling and wrestling and like sharing food and just like hugs, and it's just like really really deep experience with these men.
mm,
And when they have this catharsis, when they have this breaking down release and they're held, they just kind of like something goes from up here in the head, like living up here, to like now they're just in their bodies, and they feel like you could see this relaxation in their eyes.
mm. That must feel amazing to just
Mm-hmm.
relax and to not feel
Mm-hmm.
like this pressure to hustle to get to the next thing and to achieve the next or to get the next zero in your bank account, but just to rest and be okay
Mm-hmm.
with this beautiful version of yourself. So this client that you helped, then you helped him feel more grounded when he's talking about embodying his divine masculinity.
Yeah, this client specifically, I do remember we did some meditations around masculine energy and pushing up against, it was this guided meditation around pushing and using his body to activate, you call it anger, but it was anger, standing up for himself, especially towards bullies, I think,
Mm,
And so we processed that trauma or that experience. And it was like, instead of feeling powerless and helpless, with my support and kind of presence and also guidance and his pushing, like physically activating, like we're actually like doing an exercise where he's like pushing up against something with his arms. He starts to like be like, no, this is me, and I get to stand up for myself, and like, fuck
Mm.
you, I get to be me. And so it was
Wow.
kind of this like opening that allowed him to take up space. And I think that's probably what he meant. It was like this presence, awareness of who he was now, and the willingness to take up space that felt like, that divine masculine energy for
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
that's incredible. I'm curious to know for, the men who are listening to this conversation, for someone who is just starting to explore vulnerability, maybe emotional expression, are there
Hmm.
practical first steps that you would recommend?
I would say, yeah, I'm biased in that I think relationship is the answer. Like, you
Okay.
need a like safe relationship. So I love therapy for that reason. To be
Yeah.
honest, I think a lot of the therapy industry like fails men. I think
Mm,
it's they don't understand masculinity for one, but also men's experience, and there's a unique experience to being a man and how to address mental health. It's
yeah.
like so much guilt, so much shame.
Mm,
Therapy can feel like a big reach, and also when men have reached out, women too, but they can just feel like, oh, this was like neutral or wasn't a positive experience.
yeah.
um, and then they just discount it altogether.
Mm,
But there are good therapists out there. There are therapists that can really understand and meet and support a man, an Asian man, and I think those would be an amazing starting point.
okay.
But the key being to find someone who feels like safe, like they understand you. I would often just say an Asian man, but again, not all Asian male therapists or even therapists in general are a good fit. So you need to really pick and choose and find the right one.
Okay. Okay.
But that's like the best starting point, I think, because again, if you can find someone and meet and feel safe, you will naturally open up and feel supported, and it just builds and builds and goes deeper and deeper,
Okay.
and the relationship becomes stronger, and then the individual gets more and more out of it, so it kind of is like builds on itself. But yeah, there are books, there are podcasts,
Okay.
obviously, right?
Yep.
I would not necessarily recommend YouTube, but that's a starting point for some people.
Okay.
um just a plug for some friends whom you may know in the LA area. um, Sujin and Linda, who do Yellow Chair Collective,
Oh,
wrote a
yeah.
book called Where We Belong,
Yeah.
which I think is a great kind of validating mirror for people who are trying to understand themselves, because it goes through what families can look like in growing up Asian, what some of these racial things can look like, and how they affect each person, and then what their healing journey looks like. So it can really showcase what the process looks like wherever you are on your journey. And so that can be a good starting point as well. But yeah, therapy, coaching, finding some sort of mentorship, I think is always the best. Yeah.
Okay. That's great advice. I appreciate you sharing that. And, we'll be sure to post like your website, your work in the show notes, as well as some of the resources you just shared. I'm curious to know, is there any message, Samuel, that you would want to most leave with the Asian men listening to this conversation today? And if so, what would that be?
Mm. I'm thinking of my younger self just because I mentioned that in the very beginning,
Yeah.
actually. Wow. But I don't think most Asian men are as bad as me. I was kind of lost and in the weeds for sure. But um, yeah, the obvious thing that comes up is, you are enough, and truly like
Yeah.
saying that,
Yeah.
like you don't have to, be as successful as, like Bezos or all these people. You don't have to have the nicest chiseled physique, and like
That's
you
going to make
can
me
do all
cry,
those things.
Samuel.
Oh,
Sorry, not to make this
yeah.
about me, but that's real. I didn't expect that. That's really an incredible
Mm.
message. So I wish that for all
Yeah.
the men in our community, for sure.
Yeah. 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 And it's fine to do all the other things. I'm doing all
Yeah.
the other things, trying to do business and,
Yeah.
like, and it can be healthy. It's just needs to be balanced with this like knowing of enoughness and
Yes.
connection to oneself. And, that balance is going to be so good for you, your life, your business, like
Yeah.
your family, your relationship. It affects everything to create more balance. And so, yeah, I think that enoughness feeling doesn't just make you feel relaxed and like, oh, I'm just gonna sit on the beach for the rest of my life and I'm enough. It's like, no, when you're enough, you feel empowered. You feel empowered. You
Mm.
take different actions. You create different types of relationships. You express yourself. It's a really powerful way to live that creates more fulfillment, but also can lead to success.
Samuel, as we sort of wrap this, I'm curious to know more about your work. Is there anything
Mm.
that's really exciting that's coming up for you?
Thank you for just an amazing conversation. And yeah, I'm glad it was a little more organic because I think it just makes it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, as far as what I'm doing, uh, I guess, my therapy practice, my coaching practice, I do both right now. So I have some therapy clients that I work with in New Jersey. I'll be licensed in California soon, but my therapy practice is full. So there's a wait list. So if you want to get on
Okay.
the wait list, you can reach out.
Okay.
Yeah, coaching, I take clients on a case by case basis, and coaching, I can work with anyone anywhere in the world. So
Okay.
therapy, I cannot. And so if clients want to reach out for therapy, I can't. But if you really resonate with my work and want to work with me, regardless, then we could talk about working in a coach client type of container. That's a 12-week program that I have.
Okay.
I do individual coaching, and it's a 12-week program using the pie method and everything we've talked about. I am also planning, it's been a while, but I want to do an in-person podcast because I do have a one that I record and post all virtually. But I really want to do an in-person podcast and rent out a studio here. So that's just for me. That's what's exciting for me on the horizon.
Samuel, I can't thank you enough for your time and for the energy that you brought and for your wisdom, your expertise. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Courage Class. I hope today's conversation gave you a little encouragement and inspiration. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And for extra motivation, tools, and behind-the-scenes content, sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to share with you more there. See you next time.